Hello and welcome to another Widnes Rugby Chat. We're up to episode 5 now, I think. Another special guest this week, we've got Ian Cheveau, who's going to tell us about his plans to buy the club. I'm only joking. Ian is the editor of the RFL programme publications, including Super League Grand Final, long-time rugby league journalist covering Widnes. So I thought we'd get you in, Ian, for your expert views and have a little bit of a chat. I suppose people will want a little bit of reaction to last week's video with Luke Backhouse, who spoke to us quite candidly about his sponsorship of the club, his investment in the club, and sort of a few frustrations. What was your reaction to that? I know you sent us a tweet, didn't you?
Yeah, of course, and I did see it on social media. I was very impressed with what Luke had to say, to be honest with you. He's got some exciting ideas, and for me, I think Widnes should be listening to people from the outside a little bit more, perhaps. I think Luke would describe himself as a student of the game still, but from what he said on the video there, he's really picked it up, and why not open the door to new ideas, to new investment? Geez, Widnes are a championship club now, and that's exactly what's needed, James, in my opinion. More investment, a little bit better administration, if I can describe it that. More marketing, and if this lad's got some money to put behind it, why wouldn't you want to get involved?
Obviously, it's interesting what you say about asking for other people's help, and it's not necessarily just about the financial side. We've probably both had a bit of experience of this in terms of even like asking people outside the club to help who would probably genuinely help the club. That doesn't seem to have happened a lot over the past decade. Do you think that's something to do with the fact that, obviously Steve O'Connor, and he's a brilliant businessman clearly, he's earned a lot of money, and he deserves the utmost respect for his achievements. Yeah. But is it perhaps the difference between running a business and a sports club that's maybe being exposed a little bit? Because obviously in a business you sort of keep everything close, don't you? You keep everything tight because it's your business ultimately, it affects someone else. Whereas a sports club's slightly different because as much as you own it, ultimately, you've got, Widnes is probably dwindling now to 3,000, but potentially you've got 50,000, 60,000 people in a town who treat that club as if it's their own as well, if you know what I mean. So do you think that's maybe where...
Yeah, I do know what you're saying. For me, there's a little bit of disconnect between from a fan engagement point of view and the club. I've been covering Widnes now for 18 years, kind of, as a journalist. And last year was probably the worst I've ever seen. Not just because of on the field kind of performances, but what was going off it. It was becoming a bit of a sideshow. And I know Steve's correct me if I'm wrong, in Australia now. And if he was seeing some of the signs which were being rolled out by a section of the fans, it's not nice to see. It's not nice to see that on Sky Sports cameras. It's not nice to see whether you sat in the north stand, the south stand, but it's a job which needs now rebuilding. Steve, I would never criticise Steve because he's come in and saved the club. I remember when Widnes was on its knees and Steve did come in and do a really good job in kind of investment, and I know he's invested heavily into the club. As the drawbridge come up now, probably the answer to that question is yes. Steve is a clever businessman, and he will not want failure, so to speak, to be associated with the Widnes Vikings and his brand. But unfortunately, that's happened. You've probably seen some of the tone of my kind of social media last year and the year before, and I was saying, Widnes were sleepwalking into a relegation situation, and that's exactly what happened. And for me, maybe the administration was presiding over that. And they should have been doing something for it, not putting sticky plasters on it. I know that's slightly critical, but that's the way I see it, and that's the way I've communicated it in some of the things that I've wrote.
Yeah, I think certainly, I agree with you in that last season definitely was by far the worst I can remember in terms of the fan sort of not only the disconnection from the club, the fact that fans are unhappy. Even my dad. You stop going to games, and you think that for it to get to that point where you've got people who've been home and away week in week out for X number of years, going to Whitehaven on a Thursday night, in terrible weather, and then all these people have all of a sudden stopped coming. You've got to look and think, well, why are these people not coming? And I think the main thing for me is that it doesn't appear to have been addressed in any way. Like, obviously the fans have dropped off, but it's like, well, why are the fans? And I think there's been a bit of naivety where it's like, well, we weren't expecting crowds to go, and they have, and it's like, well, for me, I think it's like, well, how could you not expect fans to drop off after you've lost so many games, or you finished, obviously you had that, the escaping Catalan the previous seasons, and it's almost like you say, the warnings have almost been there, and nothing's been addressed. Do you think maybe Steve O'Connor's a bit of a victim of his own success in some ways? Because obviously when he came in, everything, rebranded the club, new logo, new kit, was building up, wanted to get into Super League. Obviously we had that disappointment in 2008 with the Super League licence, but to his credit, he stuck by it.
He did.
Invested in the academy, and I wrote recently that it's probably about time now that Widnes reap the rewards for that, because it's a fair achievement for Widnes that they ran a successful academy for 3 or 4 seasons in Championship even before they got into Super League. With no guarantees really that we're going to get to Super League, especially when you consider that there's now Super League clubs who don't run academies, and yet Widnes have done it all that time. Do you feel like that's part of the issue, is that almost Steve sort of is promised stuff, and then there's the famous quote that he said to Richard Lewis, wasn't there? And obviously he's not quite got the commitment perhaps that he expected from the fans or from the town, and maybe that's what's caused a little bit of the standoff between the club and the fans.
Yeah, I remember this 7,000 figure being bandied about, and when I seen it, I was instantly alarmed myself, because I've been like you. I've been watching Widnes on the terraces, since I was a kid. I played rugby league in the town, and I've seen that drop off a little bit. There's certain clubs which are no longer existing, who are now defunct, and maybe that's got a little bit to do with it as well. But when Steve was talking about this 7,000 figure, when Widnes were kind of sweeping, all the big clubs and everyone in front of him. In the glory days, they weren't getting major fans then, so to be coming out with 7,000 fans was slightly ambitious in my opinion. I speak to my father-in-law who used to go as a boy, and he said Widnes has been well supported, but now you see the drop off. It's been spectacular, really, James.
Yeah, I mean definitely. Yeah, I think certainly the last 2 seasons you've got to be really alarmed. You look. I think they said they lost 600, was it, before last season, which is effectively probably about. Obviously I don't know the exact figures, but I'd imagine 600 is about 20%. You'd imagine they're going to lose a damn sight more than that this season. So you're potentially looking at, within the space of 2 seasons, you've lost 50% of your hardcore fan base. Now, the 7,000 figure is interesting because obviously the stuff that we know, and economics, there's a lot of things that we don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think, as much as I agree with the point you're making about Widnes have never had massive crowds, I don't think 7,000 particularly is way beyond possibility. Especially when you look at like Castleford, what they attract, but I just think that it's almost like the club's not really done anything to get to that 7,000. It's almost like the club exists like it's always existed, but to get to the 7,000, the club's got to do stuff it's never done before. It's got to engage with the fans a bit more. It's got to keep them on side, and I sort of feel like the problem has been is that they've alienated the fans, they've alienated sponsors, and that obviously makes it even harder to get. You've got to almost have everything perfect to get to the 7,000.
You have, absolutely, and we can talk about attendances in generally across rugby league, and it's a big challenge for the sport at the moment. But when we go down to when I go do my shopping in Tesco or wherever, I'm not seeing as many Widnes tops. Unfortunately, obviously they've got the shop there, which is fantastic, but. There's kids wearing in City tops, Liverpool tops, Everton tops, United tops. It's not how it was. Roll back 25 years ago, when kids were throwing rugby league ball around the streets. It's all that's all changed, and now maybe Widnes should be looking, like Luke said, the other day, tapping into your Chesters, your Liverpools, having a bit more of a presence in Merseyside, because Saints aren't really doing anything at it. And geez, they were talking about this when I worked on the Widnes Weekly News, 15 years ago, we're going into Liverpool, we're going into Merseyside, but it's never ever happened.
You probably know more about this than me. The amateur side of the game in Widnes,
Yeah.
What do you think the sort of... I mean, I know amateur rugby league as a whole has dipped considerably. But what do you think it is about Widnes in particular that's made the amateur game sort of nosedive a little bit?
It's probably participation levels, really. You know, I don't know the stats in terms of, you know, SAG Rugby League and the amateur scene, but for me, you know, when I go of a morning, you know, I look at the pitches and they're not as kind of populated with players, with interested parents. You know, I know that there's a great club, you know, which you're familiar with as well. You know, Alton Hornets, Old Farm Hornets do a fantastic job, and they feed Widnes, you know, a lot of great players. Who I might add are not always playing at Widnes, by the way. We've got some classy players playing at Saints who, you know, have been in the Widnes system. So I can't really put my finger on it, Jade, in all honesty, but it's a problem. It's a problem for the town, and you know, I think we need to press the reset button on it.
Is it? I mean, like I say, I mean, the amateur rugby league discussion's probably one for another day. But do you think it's anything to do with the pro clubs? Are they taking kids too young? Because obviously we have the development squads at Widnes, and you know, obviously St Helens and all that, and you know, obviously there's always competition. You know, you look at Mark Purcell and Danny Richardson. You know, there's always competition because ultimately all the clubs are that close together.
Yeah. That
if Widnes can sign someone, well, Saints, Warwick, and Wigan can quite feasibly sign them. Do you think players need to be left in the amateur clubs a bit longer than they are, rather than pulled into the pro setup?
Yeah, I'd certainly say that there's an argument to that. You know, and you know, there's lads who I know who've been in the system who feel they've been kind of that their creativity and skills been coaxed out of them a little bit. You know, on the other side of the coin, you know, there's players there who are really making a big impression in the game as well. So you know, it's different strokes for different folks, if I can put it that way. And it all depends on that particular player. But you know, at Widnes, you know, they've got some really good coaches in there. You know, going back to the town team from under 11s upwards. You know, I think Roger Allison, kind of that Dave Roll community, do a fantastic job. You know, and now we're seeing players now come into the Widnes first team who have been in that system all the way through, and it's great to see. But now, like you said, and you know, it was well put by yourself, James, we've got to see that the fruit of that labour come through, because you can develop all these young lads all you want, but they've got to be able to deliver on the pitch. You know, last year there's some players who have come through the system who, in my opinion, are not at that standard, a Super League standard, in inverted commas, and now we'll see what they're made of in the Championship.
Yeah, I mean, that leads us nicely into talking about next season, and obviously the club has sort of nailed its flag to the mast in some regards, in terms of, right, you know, we've backed our academy for the past 10 years, and now we feel like we're at the point where we've got players of sufficient quality to do it. Do you think the squad is capable as it is now of competing at the top end of the Championship?
In short, no. And I think, you know, Widnes fans probably do need a little bit of reality check. You know, when I'm out of the town, people do stop me and ask me opinion in terms of where do I see Widnes next year? Are we going to bounce straight back up? But for me, there's better sides in that division. You know, geez, you know, look at Widnes last year as a Super League club. You know, they got turned over by London, Toronto, and Toulouse. You know, and some of them were convincing. You know, so imagine that in the Championship. You know, and let's not forget, and I say this with the utmost respect, some of the refereeing standards aren't particularly great in that division. You know, Widnes have got to go to places like Dewsbury and Batley and get results. You know, it's going to be a hard slog, this, and I think people need to kind of have a real kind of long cast think about A, the league, and B, what they're going to do, because it's tough. It's a tough league, that one.
Who for you are the sort of, you know, maybe the standout players? Who do you think is going to go well for Widnes next season? Well,
the main man for me is probably on the sidelines, or getting back to fitness, and you know, Ollie Ashwell-Bott. You know, really impressive the way he kind of started his Super League career. I think Widnes did well to retain his services, because that lad could have signed for somewhere else very, very easily. You know, really talented lad, and I think he's one to watch. But I also think Tom Gilmore, now is the time for Tom to really prove and show his class and skill at this particular level. Personally, I think he's going to thrive, but you know, the jury's out on Tom at the moment. I think with a lot of Widnes fans, but for me, having spoken to the lad, I think he's going to really set his stall down this year as a top quality Championship scrum half.
Yeah, I mean, Gilmore's an interesting one because he's almost had the 2 seasons now, hasn't he, where the club have almost backed him, they've given him the 7 shirt in Super League, and whether that
they've done everything.
Well, yeah, and whether that's because A, they thought he was ready, or B, because they couldn't be bothered spending any money to replace Kevin Brown properly, is obviously another debate. But, like I say, it's probably quite a critical season for him because he's never quite, he's had a couple of good games, hasn't he, in Super League, but he's never quite grabbed it and become like your automatic first choice. And I suppose the finest example of that is the fact that, Liam Finn was brought in towards the end of last season.
Yeah, and I was dead set against that, to be honest with you, because Liam Finn, no disrespect to him, has been a great player. He's done the majority of his best stuff in the Championship for my money. Had a good time at Wakefield, and he's been a real stalwart for Ireland. So on paper that looks a good move, but for me, Widnes should have been a little bit more acute and thought, you know what, this lad's not going to be around next year. We need to put some real Widnesian blood into this team and give the likes of Gilmore an opportunity to kind of put his stamp on things. He's got all the capabilities. We just need the right environment, the right coach to see it, and I think it's important to say as well here, a lot of the lads who will be in Widnes' 1 to 17 are going to be lads who come from Phil Finney's set up. He's handpicked these lads from young babies, if you can put it that way, and he knows all about these lads. He knows which buttons to press. I think he's going to play a really important role, not just for the club, but for also the careers of some of these lads who perhaps are on a bit of a knife edge. Your Gilmores and your Jack Owens. Yeah,
I was going to mention Jack Owens. So obviously him and Gilmore have obviously grown up, playing together and stuff. So it'd be interesting to see now that both of them are presumably going to be in the starting team week in, week out. It'd be interesting to see what sort of combination them two can put together. Because although they've both been in the first team together before, Gilmore's never quite really had a run while Owens was there.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of people don't know this, but Jack can probably easily play 6. He can play 6. He can play 7. He's got a bit of football about him, Jack. He's not realised his full potential. And I know on Twitter and social media people have been bagging him a little bit, saying, what have we gone down that route for? There's got to be better on the market, but let's give this lad a chance. He's not going to be on the earth, is he?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I think it's quite a sensible signing. From the, especially because he's got that almost utility value as well. But it'd be interesting to see, because I suppose we're all sort of hoping Widnes will sign a half-back, but let's just say that they don't. Are you thinking maybe, obviously Craven's there as well, are you thinking Craven Gilmore will be the first choice, but do you think, I remember Owens, it might have been against Lee, one of his last games for Widnes, when Widnes battered Lee in the qualifiers, I think he played 6 that day and he was brilliant.
Yeah, he's a good player, but again, Danny Craven, he's like Lazarus, he's come from the dead really. Dennis sent him out to Halifax, and before that was going to be end of it. I think he played a bit of rugby at Featherstone. Get me if I'm wrong, and I thought his Widnes career was dead in the water, but I've got to give him credit. He's certainly proved me wrong. I didn't think he had it in him to come back and create such an impression and impact. And last year he really did that, and he developed it into one of the first names on the team sheet really. Is he a Super League quality player? I'd probably say no, but he can do a job in the Championship.
And looking at sort of the rest of the squad, do you think there's anyone that perhaps hasn't necessarily, obviously Craven, Gilmore and Owens have had plenty of first team chances already. What about the players who've maybe only got a handful or even not any exposure to the first team yet? Which ones of those are you looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see young Lions, Joe Lyons. We've seen a smattering of good performances really from a young lad who's trying to make his way in the game, and I thought this lad has something. I believe Salford were looking at him towards the end of the season, thinking about bringing into their setup. There was a little bit of interest, I'm told, from the Mancunian side there, but I'm glad he's staying at Widnes. I think he's got a bright future. He's got his head screwed on, and I think he's one to kind of keep an eye on. But too, the Chapel Howe lads, for me, have got to really show what they're about this year. A lot of game time. I think both of them have now got way over 50 Super League performances under the belt now. So that they're not babies, these lads, anymore now. They've got to be leading the charge for the Widnes pack, and knowing them as I do, they will relish that. But now is the time to step up and prove their worth. Because ultimately they want to be Super League prop forwards, whether that's with Widnes or somewhere else.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's going to be with Widnes, but
the thing with the Chapel Houses is that they've got to really add a bit of grunt to the game. You mentioned the Dewsbury and Batley's. There's going to be some horrible forwards that they're going to come up against, and looking at the sort of maybe we'll talk about this in a second, but the lack of experience around them means that the Chapel Houses are going to have they're going to probably have to do some of that dirty work, ugly work that maybe they haven't done yet in Super League.
I totally agree, and I would like to see a little bit more aggression in the game. I want to see some players be rocked off their feet by these lads. These are big, strong boys. That I know the Widnes S&C staff have done a lot of work with them to kind of get them into decent physical condition, and I'm expecting them to be leading the way. I'm not saying that these guys are Terry O'Connor and Barry McDermott, but geez, let's see a little bit of that side in this division, because that's what it's all about. There's going to be your petulant stuff. There's going to be the niggle, the odd offence here and there, and these lads have got to stand up to it. Have they got it in their arsenal, in their armoury? Well, let's wait and see. Yeah. Have I seen it perfectly so far? Probably not, but geez, these are big lads, and they can stick the shoulder in.
What about Wellington Albert? He's another a big guy that for whatever reason last season didn't quite happen for him. I suppose in some ways similar to Gilmore in that it was like the club didn't trust him to play at the back end of last season, but then have handed him a deal to play a Championship.
Yeah, that to me is a real strange one. I didn't see enough personally. I'm not a rugby league coach, but I've seen him enough times to think I don't believe he's the answer. And a Widnes kind of focusing a little bit too much on this PNG link and what have you. No disrespect to what's gone before, but we're on about getting back to Super League again. We're on about building a team with quality players who can handle the Championship and get us back into Super League. Is Wellington Albert going to be in that kind of frame of mind to do it week in, week out with the likes of Batley, the likes of Dewsbury, going up to York when it's cold and wet? No disrespect to the lad, but I'd probably say no. He's a strong runner, but I'm not seeing it change.
I think opinion's quite divided, isn't it, on Wellington? Because I think people see him. You felt it in the stadium last season when he came off the bench. People sort of
lifted,
yeah. And obviously you see it a few times. You run the ball in aggressive. He'll get a hand free for an offload, and it's like, because we've not seen that a great deal over the past few years, it's almost like people got excited by that. And there's a lot of people who, you only have to see the squad announcements on Facebook, and people are like, oh, where's Wellington? But is that side of his game, you think, fine, and it's more the defensive issue why he's not perhaps the standard that we feel that Widnes require? Do you think that's what it is, or do you still think even with the attacking side he's not quite?
I think he needs a lot more coaching, James. To be honest with you, he's I don't know his backstory, but wherever he's played in PNG and down in Australia, it's a different comp over there now, and the Championship is totally different to Super League. So he's got to kind of get his head around that and come to grips with it. Is he going to be an overnight sensation? It's the jury's out again on that lad.
I suppose Widnes are probably not in a position where they can afford to take a chance. If it was a Warrington or someone else who maybe saw a bit of raw potential and developed him, but I suppose Widnes haven't got that luxury at the moment.
Yeah.
But having said that, do you feel that I don't know how to put this, but is the lack of experience around the likes of Wellington and the Chapel House going to be a factor in terms of next season? Are they going to be affected by the fact there's not real? I know Tangata's come in, and we may talk about him in a minute.
Yeah. Again, I think you've got to put the right personalities and faces around people like Wellington Albert. Make sure they're well supported, both off the field. I think most importantly with what goes on it, because end of the day, it's that close kind of goldfish bowl environment of the support mechanism of a rugby league environment at Widnes. I know it's pretty tight, but what happens, when he goes on, who's around him? Obviously, his brother's no longer there now. So what are those support mechanisms there for him? I'm sure, by the way, the club have got all this sorted, but you know, it's about performances on the field for me. You know, we're not, obviously we want to be a great professional and do all the right things in the community and be the right person and player for Widnes, but it's about what goes on in those 80 minutes.
Is that where maybe, you know, Tim Holmes has left the club, and I know he's been very good at ensuring that players have been looked after both at the club and away from the club? Are the club maybe going to miss his contributions?
Absolutely, you know, Tim's been there for almost donkey's years, part of the fixtures and fittings, and you know, he knew the club inside and out. He knew all the players, he knew all the off the field staff and all the coaches, and I was quite surprised when I read that he's been offloaded, and similar to Eamon O'Carroll as well. And you know, I think Eamon being snapped up by Steve McNamara, you know, a coach who I really respect and value. I think he's doing a great job in Catalans over there. That's a real kind of feather in the cap for Eamon, and maybe, you know, I know he will never say this himself, but it's a little bit of two fingers to Widnes as well, isn't it, in that respect, because you know, he's learning under a great setup in a great country. I'm not saying it's better than Widnes, by the way, but it's certainly warmer. But he's gonna really feel the benefit from that. Was his development stunted a little bit at Widnes? Maybe so. You know, I don't know what Franny was doing with him, but to me, it didn't look or feel right when I seen him on the pitch. You know, hopefully with the right tutelage, he can really make a really good coach in the future. We might see him back.
Yeah, I mean, he's only 31, isn't he? My understanding was that O'Carroll didn't even get offered a deal. I think Tim Holmes got offered, you know, significantly less money. So interesting to see how that all fits together. What do you think about Kieran Purtle obviously coming in as head coach?
For me, this is a really good appointment. You know, and the kind of the old sentiment in terms of what I would have loved Neil Kelly to come back, but you know, that's just me harping on to the good old days, if you like. Yeah. But no, Kieran is a quality coach. You know, look what he did at Lee under those kind of challenging circumstances. To actually get half a side out and you know, make a fist of it there was really impressive. And you know, he's got a really good track record and pedigree. And you know, I've spoken to him a couple of times last year. You know, for the summer bash programme and stuff. And you know, he's a really educated coach and a student of the game, and you know, he'll tell himself he's forever learning, and I think he'll do well at Widnes, really do. Is
it difficult for him because he's effectively coming? I mean, I don't think, apart from Owens, you know, Widnes haven't signed anyone since he arrived, so presumably he's just come in and he's got 24, 25 players that he's got to make a team out of. Maybe a different position to when, you know, typically you'd imagine a coach, you know, likes a certain style of player or wants to sign a certain player.
Yeah, I think that comes into play. You know, it's a little bit like kind of that Fulham being shown the door and Ranieri coming in. You know, they've got to work with all these different players. You know, who you've not signed, who's been signing all these players at Widnes. You know, that's a question I'd like to get answered. If it was Phil Finney, then great. Let's come out and say, yeah, it was Phil. Why not? By the way, because you know, a lot of people trust Phil. I trust Phil. He's got a good judgment for the player. He's got a good eye for the player. So why not say it? Let's not be cloak and dagger about who's signing these players. That's because, you know,
that's what's annoying people, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think Phil. I mean, I like Phil. You know, get on with him, and you know, I think the job that he's done in the academy, you know, from where it's been to where it is now, you can't knock that. You know, their aim was to have Widnes lads or Widnes Academy lads playing in the first team, and you look at, you got Whitley, Danny Walker, you know, they're playing elsewhere now, but they've still come through that pathway. That role that he's got is actually, I think, a brilliant move by the club in terms of, like I say, he knows all these players, he's known them all however long, he knows them inside and out. If he can somehow pass on that sort of exclusive knowledge in many ways, because there won't be a coach who knows as much as he does to Kieran, that's a great little team that they could develop there. And like I say, is it, you know, it's a shame maybe the club isn't leaning a bit more on that and maybe making big of a deal of it, because I know there's questions of, is James Rule signing the players or you know what?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, you know, because when you're not clear in the way you communicate, you know, it leaves you open to interpretation, and I think that's what's happened here, because, you know, Jimmy was putting his name to some of the press releases and stuff, and we're thinking, who's signing these players, you know, is it James? Has he got the right kind of credentials and qualifications to be doing that? Because he's never coached the Super League, clearly. So there was a few question marks over that, but I think it's been straightened out now.
Yeah.
Kieran's in working closely, with Phil. It's a really good move. I'd like to say that there's going to be a few more players coming in, which Kieran can kind of bring in as his own players. Maybe they will be from Lee or elsewhere. I don't know, but he's got a decent group to work with. Is it going to be challenging at the top echelons of the Championship? It remains to be seen. But for me, Widnes needs to be punching certainly in the top 3 of that competition to deem it a successful season, because I'd put my money on the line now. I can't see Widnes going up this year.
I was going to ask you about signings and potential signings or where areas you feel Widnes needs strengthening. What do you think?
I'd like to see a little bit more grunt up front. I must say, I know we've got the lad from Halifax, and he's a great signing, by the way. I think he was the best forward in the Championship last year. He's going to make a difference. I'd like to see a little bit more steel there too. People would love a named half-back, if we can put it that way, but let's give these lads a go. Let's see what the friendlies, what they've got towards Christmas and New Year look like, and let's give Kieran a chance to assess his squad. But I'd like to say that there's investment and there's money for new faces, because it needs it. I think the town needs to rank its hat on some decent names as well. Do you
think Kieran? Obviously it's gone a bit quiet last few. I mean, obviously it's not been massively noisy because they've only brought in 3 new players. But do you think we're in a little bit of a period now where Kieran's going to spend a few weeks getting to know the players he's got, which then identify? It's easy for us to say, well, we think you need a centre, but he might look at the players he's got and think, well, such a body can play centre. Yeah. Do you think that's what happened? Do you think we're probably more likely to see something happen closer to Christmas rather than sort of now?
Yeah, I think it's a case of suck it and see, really. He'll be looking at what he's got to play in terms of his bank balance, and to see whether that fits. And of course we don't know whether Gelling's coming over yet, do we? So it's a bit of a mystery. Yeah. So if that's not coming over, then we've got a bit of money to play with. One would like to think, but perhaps not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was episode 3. I had a bit of a look at the team. And we were talking about, Gelling and Inu, and sort of if those both come, it's almost like there's a different feel.
Oh yeah.
Than obviously if there isn't, because I suppose ultimately if Gelling and Inu don't come, you're sort of thinking, well, we need 2 centres. Exactly. That's the bottom line.
Away, yeah.
And it's who's available really, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of movement. It never feels. If you're asking someone, name 5 centres who Widnes could sign, or any position really, it always feels like it's a bit of a struggle trying to find names that would either A, be available, or B, want to come to Widnes.
Yeah, and we've got a centre problem. If those 2 lads don't get signed up, that's pretty clear. So you like to think Widnes would have a bit of a contingency plan. Let's not forget, there's players like Scott Giroux, which were kind of plucked from obscurity in the NRL, in New South Wales and the Bartercard Cup, and you think, well, what's out there for Widnes to get hold of? This is something which John Lawless and I used to talk to Dennis Betts about all the time. What's been doing in terms of casting our net as far as and wide as it can go, and it was always a bit of a stock answer with Dennis to say, we're looking and we are looking, and you trusted him because he's got no reason to lie about things like that. But it's all about money at the end of the day, and that's one thing which Widnes haven't got.
Well, obviously I said, if it was me, I'd be trying to get Ridyard, and obviously it sounds like Ridyard's gonna go to Lee now, but
that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I think so, because I think I think the way Featherstone are, you could probably have picked him up cheapish. I doubt he's on massive money in relative terms. So it's interesting. I know there's a few like Ian Thornley's being mentioned this week as a maybe. Is he a backup option if Inu or Gallagher come? Reece Evans has been mentioned, but I believe he's got a bit of an injury. But I think, like you say, it's almost like the identifying players that's really, it's not up to us to identify players. We're just naming players we know, but if someone can find someone. There's players in the Championship that I've seen who there's a lad Galbraith who's played at Rochdale. I think he's a really good centre. And it's like there's got to be players that are knocking around in the Championship, that Widnes would be a step up for them.
Yeah.
But I suppose, does it again hark back to the thing, was it a bit of, can Widnes afford to take a bit of a gamble on these sorts of players?
Yeah.
Because they've not got it's almost like we need a proven, experienced players, don't we, almost?
Well, let's face it, this team which is going to be going out next year, it's a little bit inexperienced. It's slightly green because the lads who are going to make up those 17 places, they're coming from within. There's not a lad in there who we can say, well, apart from Met Cahill, who's got over 100 Super League appearances. And I'm not saying that's essential, but it's nice to have if you can have that, because it's going to be a tough old slog, this. It really is. But I like to see a little bit of creativity. What's going on in France? There's some players who have retired from Catalans. Let's have a look at them. Vincent Dupont, for example, could he come over and do a job? That's just in there. But you know what I mean. We've got to be a bit creative. We're no longer the Widnes who can bring in Jonathan Davis, John Bevan, Martin Fire, because that is dreamland.
I mean, I know obviously they've signed new deals and whatnot, but like Steve Tyree for me would have been an obvious one. As a centre to bring in. He's got the experience. He's Widnes lad, whatever, goal kicker, and it's almost like we've not really been that proactive in recruitment. Liam Hull's a good signing, Tangat's a good signing, Owen's a good signing. So we have made 3 good signings, but we still sort of feel like we need another 2 or 3.
We're still missing a few players for me. Well, it's going to be too late to kind of get them embedded within the club and the culture of the club in time for next season. Again, it's another question which remains unanswered, but it's been difficult for Widnes because they've had this issue with the coach. But for me, let's be really honest with ourselves. We knew that Francis Cummins wasn't going to be the man. Way before all this the car crash happened. So I would like to have thought we would have been preparing for that eventuality when it came, but it seems to me that it didn't.
It took a bit longer. You're looking like 5-6 weeks after the club was relegated. You still didn't know who the new coach was going to be, and that have you lost 4, 5, 6 weeks research time, player development time, recruitment time maybe. Yeah,
it was a major own goal for me, but again, we're not kind of subject to the inner workings of the club. And maybe that was something Phil was working on behind the scenes, but again, externally, we only get told what we get told by the club.
Of course,
if there was a plan in place, with a strategy to get a new coach, what was it, where was it, and why was it not delivered in a better time frame, in my opinion?
So, just to finish off, you've said you don't think Widnes will go up next year. It's pretty much Toronto. You're thinking they're just going to walk away with it. Toulouse will be up there.
Yeah, I think Toronto could be a Manchester City job in the Premiership in football, really, because they have got the real spending power. They're making major impact over in Canada, and that's to the betterment of the game, by the way, and I'm all for that. But they're going to be strong. You've got Toulouse again, who are going to be strong. Halifax, a really professional outfit. This isn't going to be a cakewalk for Widnes. I think they're going to struggle at first, but they will get to grips with it.
But then, having said all that, ultimately it just comes down to one game at the end of 80 minutes. If you can beat Toronto, it doesn't matter if Toronto win 30 out of 30 or whatever it is, 27 out of 27. If Widnes can beat them in one game over here at the grand final, that's all they need to do.
Absolutely, and that's what they should be getting on to. Anything can happen on any given day in rugby league, as you know.
Yeah. Ian, thanks very much for coming. It's been a pleasure. Everyone, thanks for watching. Please do share, like, comment on this video. Let us know what you thought of Ian's comments and my comments, and we'll see you again same time next week.